Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to a bonus episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists. My name is Andrew. I'm your host. This episode was recorded, and currently you can tell that this intro is being recorded at RDH Under One Roof. So, one, I apologize a little bit about the background noise. It does kind of come and go as the attendees get more excited, and I think we started right as the exhibit hall opened, and so we got this influx of people coming in. But it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. This episode is sponsored by LISTERINE. There's some really cool studies that we talk about at the end, so I really want you to make sure that you listen all the way through it. The oral microbiome that we speak about is essential to everything that we do as hygienists. And I think the tried and true, hey, go brush and floss your teeth is super outdated. We've talked about that on the podcast for years and years and years. But this is more information supporting that message. So thank you again to LISTERINE. Thank you to Angie Stone for being a part of this. And here is the episode.
A tale of two hygienists.
Listeners, welcome back. I'm just overjoyed by the day that's going to happen right now. I am welcoming back for the bajillionth time Angie Stone. Oh, we have an applause thing. I don't think I can do the applause thing on this one, but isn't that wonderful? It's not going to come onto the podcast, but we're all listening to an applause right now. Angie, welcome back.
Hey, Andrew. Thank you for having me. Oh, my gosh. I can't think of anything that I love more than sitting here, and I can actually see you.
Yes.
Right? And we're like across the table
we're
from
in
each
person,
other.
And
we're in person.
lovely.
We got to hug each other. I mean,
Yeah.
which we both like, right?
We're
And
definitely huggers.
Yeah. So all is right with the world. We are here at Under One Roof. I mean, it's like Disney World for hygienists, right?
Yes, it is. It's so much fun here. And you guys can hear it in the background. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of excitement here. There's a lot of new products. There's, just giveaways and awards and all. It's fun. And, we're in Florida, which is now my new home, which I don't know if you've been on since I moved down here.
No, I have
it's been
not.
a couple of years.
Yeah.
So let's do this, if you don't mind. We've actually really grown a lot in the last 2 years. So if you don't mind, for our audience, just kind of going back and talking about who you are, a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So as Andrew said, my name's Angie Stone, and I'm a professional speaker. I've been on the speaker circuit as a hygienist for, several years. I started my speaking journey here at Under One Roof in 2007.
Nice.
So I've spoken in 47 states and 6 countries to date, and just really have tried to make a difference in the world of the people who I can reach. And a lot of it is in the realm of elder care. Mm-hmm. So if people aren't aware, I've spent the last, 17 years working, trying to keep the oral health of our elders that live in care communities, to keep their oral health good. And I had a company that was placing hygienists as contractors into these places, and COVID took that out.
Such a
so
bummer.
It didn't recover, and I was devastated. I wasn't sure if my life was ever going to be the same. My identity was kind of taken away. And it's crazy how the world, or whatever you believe in, is preparing you always for the next step.
Yeah.
And you just don't sometimes see that next step because you're not even creating the next step.
Yeah.
And so where I'm at right now is I've been working with a lot of Alzheimer's patients. My dad has Alzheimer's. He's in the kind of the early, late stages of Alzheimer's. And I've really just recognized how we don't have much in the way of how do we reduce our risks for that ridiculous disease, and how can we prevent it? Because once we have it, there is absolutely no cure at this point. There isn't a pill we can take to stop it, and there isn't a pill we can take to reverse it. They can't do surgery. So really we have to focus on the prevention and the risk reduction. So that's really where I'm at this point professionally, is really trying to help people understand that we got to think about our brains.
Yeah. You've been so powerful as a speaker over the years. I don't know if you realize how amazing, when you put together a presentation, I remember we were at Smiles at Sea.
Yep.
And there was this presentation that came on about elder care that I've never actually even watched before. And the way you speak with the slides that you choose of your own, selection, not like a Getty Images, taken slide, of the befores and afters, and this is what we can do to help other people, is so incredibly powerful. And it was one of my favorite, I think about that all the time, my favorite lectures to ever listen to. And I've listened to a lot.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. I just think that when you have something that excites you and that you're passionate about, it will come across, right?
Yeah.
It will come across, and that's where our power is. I have a mentor that always used to say, find what juices you, right? Yeah. And it's like, if you find what juices you, you know what? The world is great because you can make a difference then.
I'm really excited to talk to you today about just something I think that's the base of, it's not basic, but it's the base of what we do as hygienists all the time, right? And, we're going to talk about the oral microbiome. You are here on behalf of LISTERINE.
Yeah.
And did you guys already give your lunch and learn today?
We did. How
did that go?
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And the people that were in the audience were super excited to hear some new information that hasn't been talked about before. And LISTERINE's got some new research, and it's all about the control of the oral microbiome. And it's super fascinating. And we had a great lunch and learn today.
Well, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit. I mean, this might be, again, it might be a little bit refresher for some people, but this might be brand new information for others. So let's talk a little bit about the microbiome. Let's, as not too clinically deep, but loosely define, what are we looking at? What is the microbiome? Is it good? Is it bad? Can it be good or could it be bad? What are we looking at? Yeah,
so I'm glad that you mentioned that this could be a review for some people. Obviously, for some hygienists, it's a review, and for maybe somebody else, it isn't a review, right? So we spend our entire profession as hygienists really trying to control what's going on in the mouth, right? And we like to talk about it as plaque, right? Yeah. But I think that we really need to elevate this whole thing and get rid of, if you will, that word plaque, because telling a patient you have a little plaque here, it's like it doesn't motivate them at all. It's like, okay, so I have a little plaque hanging on my wall too. So
exactly, right?
What's the difference, right?
It's an award.
It's an award. Woo! I got an award on my teeth.
Yeah.
Good for us. But talking about actually what is going on in the mouth and what is causing what's going on in the mouth, and that is the oral microbiome, right? As we know, it's all of the bacteria that get together and create this community, and they like to hunker down, right, and create this extracellular matrix, which makes them crazy hard to get rid of. And so we obviously have good bacteria in our mouth that kind of keep the peace. And then we have all of those other crazy ones that are typically the gram-negative, obligate anaerobes, right? And so all of these guys and girls, these little bacterias, make up the oral microbiome. And we as hygienists, our whole entire goal in our life, whether we realize it or not, is to help our patients keep these bacteria at the levels that they're not causing them any oral disease. How's that?
I love it. That's, in a nutshell, exactly what we need to know. We're going to move on to the next one. We're going to move on. We have this oral microbiome.
Yeah.
We have good ones. We have bad ones. So keeping the peace, destruction. Let's talk about the dental prophylaxis.
Yeah.
What's its impact on the oral microbiome?
So we know that when our patients leave our chair, their mouth is the cleanest it's ever going to be, right? Because let's face it, we've spent at least 2 years in school, some of us longer than that, right, to learn how to make the mouth clean. That's what we do. And so when our patients leave our offices, that's the cleanest it's ever going to get. And we're like, yay us, we did what we do, right? We're rock stars at that. And then what happens is the patient is left to their own devices, right? And we talk to them about toothbrushing and flossing, and we hope that they're doing that. And then guess what? They come back in 6 months, and they have that same little plaque in the same spots, and we want to break out the toothbrush again and show them how to floss. And we know that the definition of insanity is what? Doing the same thing over and over and over. So we have to mix up our game if we really are going to help these patients to get their oral microbiome under control.
So we have, the microbiome, it happens in multiple areas, right? So we have in your mouth, you have in your gut, you have all these different places that it lives.
Yes.
So why is it so important? I mean, obviously we're dental professionals, so we focus on the mouth, but why is it important that we start with the mouth?
Because it's like the mouth is the entryway to the body, right? And so when we have the first bacteria after that patient leaves our office, that's these little bacteria that come back and they're above the gum line and they're all happy. But over time, in about 48 hours, that bacteria, if we're not maintaining it, is underneath the gum line.
Yeah.
So now that's when the party really is going to get going, right? Because that's when those gram-negative obligate anaerobes are going to come in. And those bacteria are what causes the destruction of the periodontium, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's even bigger than that, right? We all know this. We all know that it doesn't just stay contained to the mouth, but it can begin there. And then once it leaves the mouth and it's going through the body, it's creating all sorts of havoc with everything else. And so that oral microbiome and that balance between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria is key to keeping us overall healthy. It's the oral systemic link, right?
And we've seen that impact, study after study after study that shows how important that is. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Are there limitations to our prophylaxis?
I think that there are limitations, especially if we're hand scaling and we don't have any, if we're not doing any of the ultrasonic usage and things like that. And of course, we cannot clean all of the bacteria.
Exactly.
And we shouldn't, because there are some good guys. So the problem really comes in after that patient leaves our chair.
Walks out that door.
Walks out the door, right?
Yeah.
And they're left to their own devices, as you said, Andrew.
Okay, I want to shift back to a little bit where we talked about the biofilm is really hard to control. It's really hard to completely get everything out of the mouth that's bad while we're letting the good things repopulate. But can you go into a little bit more about that shift from bad to good?
Or let's talk about the shift from good to bad first.
Okay.
So when they leave our operatory, they're kind of, pretty well, I would think, in a good state with the bacteria, right? And the good bacteria start to repopulate, and then some bad bacteria start to come into the picture, and that's all kind of going on supragingivally, right? And the biofilm is thin at that point as that biofilm is beginning to be created. But the more that we leave that biofilm uninterrupted, that's when the bad guys are coming in, all those guys that are going to cause the trouble, okay, the bacteria. And so they're coming in the longer that we leave that biofilm uninterrupted. And then from supragingivally, we know that things start going subgingivally, and now all of the gram-negative obligate anaerobes are the ones that are coming to the party. And the biofilm really knows what it's doing. It's like the certain bacteria show up right on cue, and then the next bacteria come in right on cue, and then before you know it, if we're not paying attention, we've got all of this bacteria below the gum line that's causing trouble.
We're back to where we started.
And we're back to where we started. And the goal is that we want to have not dysbiosis, right? Dysbiosis is when we have too many bad bacteria, but we want to have symbiosis, right? So symbiosis is when everybody's living happily together. But eubiosis is when we have more good bacteria than bad bacteria. So everything is really in the realm of where it's supposed to be for health.
And then when we don't maintain all of that, that's when things get, terrible. How do we climb back out of that from maybe a home care standpoint, or what does that look like? How do we transition again?
Yeah, so we know that dental hygienists are really big on a toothbrush and floss, right?
Brush and floss.
Brush and floss.
And you put brush and floss in your bag, and that's going to cure you.
And we sound like a parrot because we say brush and floss so many times. Like brush and floss, brush and floss, brush and floss. And the patients start to think, oh my Lord, could you tell me something different? Because, again, just telling someone to brush and floss and they're not doing it, what else do we got, right? What else do we have? And so what we know is that we need mechanical removal of the biofilm, but we also know that adding an antimicrobial aspect to that armamentarium, that 3-step process, is really where the magic happens, is to keep that biofilm under control. That antimicrobial is key. And so we have, talking about dysbiosis, we have several reasons that people can be more susceptible to dysbiosis. And one of them is because we don't have oral hygiene that we're really on top of. And our diet and glycemic control, we know that, can also be altered. And it can also alter our oral microbiome using antibiotics, right? We're all talking about antibiotic resistance. Well, antibiotics can wipe out everything, all the good guys, all the bad guys.
Yeah.
So using an antimicrobial can be more beneficial and not create that dysbiosis. We know that smoking and vaping as well can cause dysbiosis. And certain diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis can cause dysbiosis as well, and so can pregnancy. So there are some, ways that we're really getting this bacteria altered in a way that it shouldn't be altered.
So my next question I have is, who are the most at-risk populations when we don't manage biofilm well?
Well, obviously, I would say anybody who has any autoimmune disease, right? Any heart disease complications, anybody who doesn't have the manual dexterity to take care of themselves and they rely on someone else to take care of them, those folks are at a high risk, right? And those are the people that do the things that I just mentioned, smoking and vaping and not controlling diabetic numbers and things like that.
So what have you learned in your partnership with LISTERINE? What are the really key points that I think that we need to walk away from this podcast knowing?
Yeah, so I am part of the LISTERINE advisory board for this year, and my role there is to help our colleagues understand the new research that's out around LISTERINE, and so that's super exciting. What they found with their research, I'm just explaining the research just at a high level, right?
Sure.
The biggest thing for me as a hygienist that I'm taking away from the research is they had several different groups, obviously a control group, that didn't do anything out of the ordinary. They had a group of subjects that would come into a location and have their teeth flossed by a hygienist Monday through Friday. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
and brush. The patient would, or the subject would brush, and the hygienist would floss the teeth, okay, for 12 weeks.
Yeah.
And then the next group would brush, and they had the flossing supervised by a hygienist, okay?
Okay.
And then the third group was only brushing and rinsing with
First of
LISTERINE.
all, I love the makeup of this already. It's just, yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it's super cool, right? Because we're always like, we floss really well, and I'm not saying what LISTERINE found is not that hygienist didn't floss well. That's not where this is going.
Right,
okay?
right.
So the knee-jerk reaction of the hygienist can be like, oh my gosh, no. So let's, whoever's listening to this, don't get your undies in a bind yet, all right? Because what they found is really, really cool.
Yeah.
The recent clinical study demonstrated that LISTERINE antiseptic is 4.6 times more effective than floss for sustained supragingival plaque reduction in those people who simply brushed and rinsed than in the group that was professionally flossed or professionally supervised.
Oh my gosh. Interesting.
So what are you thinking, Andrew?
I feel like that's not where you thought that it would go, right? We take the profession so darn seriously. And we've been preaching this, hey, if you brush and floss, you're going to be okay. And then the patient supposedly doesn't. Like, we assume that they don't because they come in with disease.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Interesting. This is fascinating.
Yeah. And so really what the study conclusion is that it's not that people aren't supposed to floss.
Sure.
Right? This is kind of like a trifecta. Okay? So we've got the mechanical reduction of the bacteria, of the biofilm, which we absolutely need, but we absolutely also need that antimicrobial to help keep that oral biofilm at a very low level and keep that biofilm thin. So when the patient leaves our practice after they have their teeth cleaned, that biofilm starts to build up. What we know is when they add an antimicrobial to their home care, that keeps that biofilm thin, okay? And when the biofilm is thin, none of those bad guys can live in it, right?
Nice.
And so we just, with the rinsing of the antimicrobial twice a day, we're really keeping the biofilm thin. And that's the key. That's the key.
I love it. And I feel like just from and this is, a deduction, this isn't probably, I don't know if it's supported in the research, but the deduction is when we're doing things like this, that's full mouth, not just on our teeth and not just in between our teeth, but this is getting the tongue, this is getting the cheeks, this is getting, the inside of the lip.
Yeah.
You're going to reduce that bacterial load. It's just going to be just lower just in general.
Correct. And that's one of the reasons that the mouth is so critical, is because there are all these places that those bacteria can stick to, those biofilms like you just mentioned, Andrew, the cheeks, the tongue, So we really have to incorporate keeping the bacteria off of all of those structures.
Okay, so last question.
Yeah.
I know we kind of already answered it, but let's talk to the hygienist that is giving post-op instructions now to their patient. What do you say?
Yeah. So the messaging I think that we need to be sending as professionals is, number one, we need to lose that verbiage that someone has a little plaque on their teeth. Okay? Mm-hmm. I don't think that we should be using the word plaque at all. It is microbiome. Okay? And bacteria load and levels of bacteria, because people can understand that. And that's really what we're talking about, right? So I'm talking to my patients about that, and then talking to them about how we want them to use the toothbrush and interdental cleaning, whether they're using floss, maybe they can't use floss, so they're using some interdental cleaners of some sort. But we also need to understand that there's another piece that helps us to control that bacteria from the get-go so that they are not getting any disease of the gum tissues whatsoever.
Are there considerations for different Listerine products depending on the patient?
So that's a great question. The research, which is in the Journal of Dental Hygiene, the whole publication is talking about these 3 research projects, and I kind of highlighted one. So people can go and look for those studies. Also on the Listerine website, they can find the studies that were done that were just released. And the research has been done with the Cool Mint version of Listerine.
That's right there.
I know.
So we're good with that.
I know. And that's that's the best seller in the Listerine line is the Cool Mint. So that's where all of the research has been done with that particular product.
Fantastic. So listeners, this is going to be in the show notes. So make sure you go through and you can click through it and you'll be able to access all of that research. So Angie Stone, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you as always.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate you more than you know.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of 2 hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of 2 hygienists.